everyone. It's a privilege to be gathered here on this online platform for today's webinar on the topic Working with Law Firms, Prospects and Opportunities Ahead, organized by Mark Gregorius College of Law Center for Internship and Placement. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all of you to this webinar. Mark Gregorius College of Law, managed and run by Siro Malkara Church, has a long tradition of engagement involving educational excellence. Our institution, established in 2012, has now over 900 students and offers 4 different programs, which include BA LLB, BBA LLB, BCom LLB, and LLM. It is today a proud holder of Sylph Millet's Institutional Excellence Award received in 2017 and is also identified as an emerging institution of excellence. Our institution Center for Internship and Placement plays an important role in preparing prospective lawyers to meet the career needs of the legal profession. The center assists law students in developing their knowledge, attitudes, and skills to take advantage of career opportunities. It bridges the gap between students, alumni, and employers. The center aims to help our students to tackle the best career opportunities across the globe. I would now like to invite Professor Dr. Thomas Kuti, PG, Vice Principal, Mark Gregorius College of Law, to deliver the welcome address. Sir, you're on mute, sir.
Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Namaste and welcome to one and all who joined in the online platform for the wonderful academic session on working with law firms, prospects, opportunities ahead, organized by the Center for Internship and Placement of Mark Gregorius College of Law. How great joy to welcome the 2 eminent attorneys who made themselves available for the seminar. I do acknowledge and thank Professor Sushma George of Mark Gregorius College of Law for her help to get these speakers, and I'm told that both the speakers are classmates of Professor Sushma George and of course good friends. D.I.M. Matthews is a paternal partner of Chow LLP's New Jersey office. She's a specialist in business, immigration laws, and corporate compliance. She completed her graduation from NALSA and post-graduation from Mitchell Law University. Ma'am, wholeheartedly, I welcome you to this webinar. We have with us Kripa Mariam Joy is 11 law firm. She is specialized in legal transactional work, including in the impact of investment space. She's a graduate of National Law University, Bangalore, postgraduate from Columbia University. She also holds a degree in management from IIM Ahmedabad. Ma'am, with great joy, I welcome you to this webinar. With a sense of pride, I welcome our director, Dr. Koshi Isaac Punamurthy, and my faculty members, especially Dr. Liba Babu, who is the coordinator of the program, Professor Sushma George, Professor Ria, the IQAC facilitator, Professor Vinulal, and all other faculty members assembled here, and also the student participants of this webinar. Have a nice evening. May God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you for your valuable words, sir. Law firms are business entities that offer a bouquet of legal services primarily to business houses as well as to individuals. In general, law firms do all nature of work, but there are also boutique law firms that offer niche services in sectors such as IPR, tax law, and WTO laws. This session is to build familiarity with the scope of work and the work culture of these organizations. We are really honored to have 2 guest speakers, Advocate Kripa Mariam and Advocate D.I.M. Matthews, in this webinar with us today. Now, I invite Ms. Anjana Kurup, student of Mark Gregorius College of Law, to introduce the speaker of the first session.
Good evening. Today we have with us Advocate Kripa Miriam Joy to speak on the topic Working with Law Firms, Opportunities and Prospects Ahead. Advocate Kripa joined Elever in 2021 as the firm's general counsel. She has close to 15 years' experience in legal transactional work, including in the impact investment space. Advocate Kripa has previously worked with Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas in Mumbai and Paul, Weiss, Rifkind, Wharton and Garrison LLP in New York. Immediately prior to joining Elever, Kripa was general counsel at Lightrock India, the impact investing initiative of the LTT Group. Kriba also headed the learning and training function at Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas and has taught a seminar course at the National Law School of India University. Advocate Kripa completed her undergraduation from the National Law School of India University, her LLM from Columbia Law School, New York, and a management degree from the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. With immense pleasure, I would like to invite our esteemed speaker, Advocate Kripa Miriam Joy, to take the session. Madam, please.
Hi, everyone. Dr. Thomaswati, Director, Dr. Koshi Isaac, Dr. Liba Babu, Professor Sushma George, all other faculty members, dear students. It's a great pleasure to be here and to be talking to you. Especially thanks, Sushma, for this opportunity. It's great to connect again after so many years, and it's always a pleasure to, be back in each other's lives. So it's a great opportunity, and I thank Sushma for all the effort that she took to kind of, find our contact details, pull this together. So really appreciate this. Anjana, thank you for the warm welcome and the introduction. Um, so just when I was speaking to Sushma about what might make sense, can you all hear me? Just, sometimes there's connection issues. Okay. So when I spoke to Sushma about what might make sense, the way we thought about it was, I'll briefly talk about how I did these various things, and also some things about how one found jobs and internships, and what law firms sometimes do and what impact investing funds do. And then you can ask me questions. I'll keep it brief and short. So I actually grew up in Kerala. My parents were teaching at in a college in Alua. So my mother was teaching at Union Christian College, so we stayed there. I did all my schooling in Cochin and Alua. So the first time I actually went out of the state to study was when I went to law school in Bangalore, which is when I got to meet Sushma. So it was a great learning curve, both from a cultural perspective and otherwise. And law school was a interesting experience that way. Um, but I was also not a person who came from a family where there was like a lot of lawyers and we knew law firms and or how law firms functioned. So I think one of the key ways in which one explored, how to think about a career in law was through internships. Now, initially, I think my idea of law was very litigation focused because that is the kind of things you see in movies, in common practice, especially when you're like living in, I think, Kerala. But there was a whole other world out there, which I gradually explored through different internships, talking to people as things moved. So law school, at least, and I think most law schools now have a very structured way of taking in students for internships, which is, there are times of the year when they take applications and then they do interviews, and all of it leads up to it. But when I was there, it was a little more unstructured. So one of the things you did was, just look up law firms. There are lists that are available on the web. There is a list called Legal 500, which talks about law firms, different practice areas. So that was the first way by which I familiarized myself with the whole world of like transactional law. At least in terms of names, what are the firms, what are tier one firms, what are tier two firms. And also, with each name that you see, you kind of try to find connections. Maybe it's someone who went to the same law school as you are, or who knows someone who went there, or same town or same school. Even if it's like 2 degrees removed, I think that's sometimes a good way to explore and understand, what people are doing and how to kind of build a connection with them, even if it's just to have a conversation. Um, After law school, I joined CAM as part of the campus placement process. That's Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas. And there, and as some of you may already know, law firms have transactional corporate practice and a litigation practice. And transactional work itself is subdivided into various practice groups. Broadly, there'll be like mergers and acquisitions, banking and finance, maybe competition law, tax. But even within, say, corporate law or banking and finance, there'll be subgroups. There'll be project finance. There'll be like, public M&A, private M&A. It's highly specialized right now, as in the way firms function now. So what firms like Cyril Amarchand and my firm in New York, Paul Weiss, did is they let you rotate initially so that you do work in different practice areas to understand, what each area is and see what kind of strikes your interest. Because sometimes the skills required for each is different. And I think fundamentally transactional work is sometimes a slightly different skill set from disputes related work, be it arbitration or presence in courtrooms. Um, so from there, it was more like, I wanted to study further, and that's how I explored doing a master's degree. Now, I think in terms of what makes sense in terms of an application, I think things would have changed from the time I made the application to now. But I think the broad story is that you have to make a case. I mean, you have to have good academic records and things like that. That always helps. But beyond that, I think you have to show a case or write a story as to why you want to do it and how it makes sense in terms of the steps you see for your own career path. And part of the story can also be how did you explore different things and come to this conclusion that this is what you wanted to do. But that consistency of, building that narrative. I mean, this is what I did, this is what I did, and that's how I figured I want to do this. And if I do this course, that's how it takes me one step closer to what I want to do. I think that kind of narrative really helps, is my sense. I mean, Dia obviously also has done the same thing, so I'm sure her insights might be slightly different and more nuanced, and there are all different perspectives. So I think as many inputs as all of you can get from different sources, it'll be helpful. I spoke to a lot of my seniors at the time and people I was working with, and all of it has been helpful. And that's something I would encourage you to do as well through your career as you're studying. After law school, I mean, after my master's in New York, I joined a law firm there. That was also a primarily transactional law firm. Um, and we had different practice areas, and I don't know if anyone has people know what I mean by transactional law. Would you want me to kind of explain that a little bit? Okay.
Yes.
So what I broadly mean by transactional work is non-disputes related work. So that could be whenever there is like a big investment in terms of a share, equity investment, by which I mean buying shares, or when there's some loan that's being given. There's a lot of documentation, diligence, and that all that goes behind it. So law firms are actively involved in checking out the company, identifying what the risks are, then drafting the documentation, negotiating it, then executing it, and making sure that the transaction happens. So there is tax input, employment law input, IP law input, corporate law input, and these are large documents. And depending on what the nature of the transaction is, that could be different. For a investment, it could be a shareholders agreement and a share subscription agreement, or a share purchase agreement. If you're looking at a bank loan, it could be, depending on the type of loan, you will have different documents like a term loan or a revolver. You can also have underlying security documents, because when you give a loan, you want security. It could be just a general security agreement or some escrow agreements, some hypothecation agreements. There are also like layers of debt that people take. Like, they'll take uh, one level of debt, then there's more debt which is more junior to it, which means if there is a claim, one has priority. So when there are multiple layers of debt, there are lots of creditors. So they enter into what's called an intercreditor agreement. So this will be like, and if you're doing like other kinds of structured finance documents, there'll be other documents. Another area of practice which is common there, in which is a large part of transactional practices, is capital markets, which is when there is an IPO or a debt issuance in the public market that's listed, for example, and a non-convertible debenture that's listed. There are a lot of filings, diligence, disclosures that have to be done, and law firms help with all of that. This is a very like simplistic, high level, uh, uh, explanation of the major buckets. And there are also like a lot more nuanced work and a lot more variations of all of this that will be done. So this is broadly transactional work. Um, yeah. Um, in terms of um in terms of what I did after, so Paul Wise was mostly like transactional work, and that's actually when I first heard about impact investing because I had a chance to work on a pro bono matter for a fund called Acumen there. Now, what funds do is investment funds do is they actually invest in companies. They put in money, they give capital so that the companies can grow. And after a point of time, they hope to, sell the shares and get like a good profit. Some companies will do well, some companies will do not so well. So it's sort of like, overall, the funds will want to make money. So for that, they also seek investment from individuals who put in money into like a pooled vehicle. And then, this money is deployed to portfolio companies, which is like the onward investment. And then when the investment is doing well and they get an exit from the company, the money is distributed back to the, people who gave the money initially, and the people who managing that investment also get a good fee. So that's basically the broad range of investment funds. Investment funds can be of various types depending on which stage in the life of a company they are investing. It could be, venture capital or private equity, which is more in the growth stage. And what I work in is called like an impact fund, which means, we invest in businesses at an early stage, but those businesses have to create some social impact. So we invest in businesses which generate employment or, help to provide some services in rural areas or access to financing, access to banking, loans, etc. And the skills that come into play here is largely the the transactional work related to investment. So the shareholders agreement, share subscription agreement, all of that sort of comes into play here in the investing world also. So that's sort of a brief version of how I segued from transactional law into like a different role in between on the learning and training front, and then back to uh, as general counsel at Elevar Equity. Um, that is, I think that's sort of all that I wanted to, I thought about. But Sushma, if you think there's something else I should talk about, anyone else? Sushma, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I think we can ask for questions right away because some of them might have something to interact with you about, and then if you want to, you can just put in something else. And yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. So it's Afina. Afina, you can.
Thank you, ma'am. Students, this session is open for interaction. Please ask your questions.
Hello, ma'am. Hello. Actually, I have a doubt that I've heard that most of the top law internship firms require interview sessions. So, can you please help us how to ace those interviews so that it can be really helpful?
Hi, Nandita. I haven't. You're right. I think most law firms do conduct an interview before they select people. Um, in terms of, I think, acing it, I think you just have to be one. I think you have to be clear and about why you want to do the internships. And really, I'm not the best person to give you interview tips for internships because it's been some time since I did it. But I think as with any interview, you should you should be clear as to you should know what they do. Like if I go to an interview and I don't know what the organization that I'm trying to get into does, that clearly shows like a lack of interest on my part. I know a friend, not quite a friend, but an acquaintance who went into an interview and through the entire interview thought that he was interviewing with company X when he was in fact interviewing with company Y. And clearly that did not know well. I mean, that's clearly an extreme example. But I think to go to an interview You should really research on what the law firm does, what the practice areas are, read up on the people you are interviewing, try to find connections. I think sometimes a narrative or common experience build a, and clearly everything else should also be like be well turned out, be well groomed, have clear answers in your mind so that you have the words easily. Those come to mind.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, good evening, ma'am.
Hi, hi.
Ma'am, I'd like to know, this is something similar to what Nandita asked. So, ma'am, what do you think one should do to make his or her application stand out?
Uh, I mean, I think clearly good academic records is always a good start. But I think you should also make sure it doesn't stand out for all the wrong reasons like typos, bad formatting, spelling mistakes. Um, in terms of anything that you should also like make it easy for a reader to kind of get the key highlights of what you've done, because you should know that they are going through many resumes. So the key information that you really want them to take away, you should make clear that the reader can easily see from the resume. uh, and it shouldn't be lost in somewhere in the document. I think sometimes people also say, it's easy. You should also write it such that it's crisp, and you should also say, this is what I achieved. This is how it was measured, like a consequence of, rather than say I have leadership skills. It's easier to give like a tangible example and say I was XYZ of this organization, and in that role I did this. So that's something I would just leave you with.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Good evening, ma'am. I have recently read an article that top-tier law firms like Luthra accepts only experienced candidate to work for them. So, ma'am, how can a fresher candidate wanting to be part of such a top law firms get into it?
Uh, the way I've seen it is through internships, because it's a way for them to get to know you, and for you to know them. Because I think it's important that not just that they should hire you, you should be clear this is what you want to do, because it's a pretty intense experience. It's a lot of hours, it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of work. And it's easier to do all these things when it's something that you enjoy. So I think internships is probably the one way I have seen it being done.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good
My name
evening.
is Amal. Ma'am, is it all right if I ask a question?
Sure, sure.
Ma'am, when you intern, you get the opportunity to work with a lot of accomplished people. So, while doing so, how do you network? As in, how do you build positive professional relationships with them?
Networking is a lifelong, I think, process. I think at various stages, it comes with its own different networking challenges. I think for some people it's more intuitive than others. For me, it is less intuitive because I'm very happy just sitting at my desk and reading a document and just working hard through it. Um, but I think just being there'll be people who are friendly, less friendly. I think it's just easiest if you find the friendlier faces in office and try to connect with them rather than so I think just being around, doing your job well, being pleasant, well turned out, open to, I think, interacting when people are being there. I think some of the interactions have happened around lunch tables. A lot of the relationships, at least for me, have been built around work done. Like, it starts as a work relationship, and over time, you kind of, it becomes a personal connect, because then there are more natural segues to kind of build that relationship. At least that's what has worked for me. Yeah, find common ground. And sometimes there are like cricket teams and others, but I don't play cricket, so I never really bonded on that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, Anand.
Mom,
Yeah, ma'am. What would you say is the three main qualities that a person need for working in a legal firm?
Um, See, once someone said, working in a law firm is like running a marathon, not a sprint. And I think that sort of summarizes really the qualities you need. One is you have to be perseverant. It takes time, it takes effort, and you shouldn't give up. There'll be days when it feels like it's all coming together, and there'll be days when it feels a little overwhelming. I think one has to be fairly solution oriented. I think understanding commercial rush, but that's I think a little later in your career to kind of help your client come to a solution in terms of helping. A lot of transactional work is about negotiations, right? Like helping to close a document. So if you just say this is where I start and this is what I want, it may not help to close. So I think you have to be solution oriented. And I think thirdly, especially in early days, you have to be very detail oriented and diligent, right? It. I think that's a first basic requirement. Like if there's a document full of typos or with ungrammatical sentences or research that has not been done properly or someone has been careless about things, then that's a point of concern because that's considered basic hygiene in terms of transactional work.
Thank you, ma'am.
Shilpa, I'm going to ask you a very pointed question. What part of your law school education actually helped you get through the law firm work routine and all? And I'm referring to things like assignments and all. The systematic way in which you probably did your assignments and your seminars or vivas and all of that. I mean, does it really contribute directly to the work? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the only answer to that question, I think, is yes, Sushma. See, I think all the assignments and research helps you to work through questions and answers or issues that come up efficiently in terms of looking at research and coming up with like a short write up, be it a note. I think it gives you the training to read document for nuance, understand arguments, see if I write a sentence this way, how many different ways can it be interpreted. I think all of this kind of it's like a muscle that you build, and the more writing and reading you do, and the more vivas and questions sessions where you have to answer and defend positions or take a counter position, it really helps, be it like at a negotiation table or while you're reviewing a document, or even just like an interaction with someone, because these are all, some of it is direct, some of it is just subtle. I think it just sometimes gives you confidence in your own ability and point of view also, because people will challenge you, right? So to know that there's some, I mean, you can do it at some level, and there is some merit to some thoughts you might have. I think it gives you a certain underlying confidence. So I think in short, it all builds up. Sushma, you're on mute.
And you mentioned a lot of agreements that you have to actually handle over a period of time. You learn that on the job, right? And that's
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I
yes.
think depending on which practice area you are in, you will handle different documents. So it's not like I think people get specialized over years, and initially with the rotation with each practice group, you might handle a certain set of documents. You move to a different practice group, it's a different set of documents. But once you choose one thing and you specialize, you're probably handling a subgroup of these documents rather than everything. But at the end of the day, these are contracts, and in some ways there are broad principles that apply across these. So some skills translate well across practice groups. And yes, I learned it on the job, but I think law firms help you do that. So just to build on that, I think traditionally law firms have like a very work with someone and you learn on the job. But I think as law firms are growing bigger and practices are growing and communications growing faster, it's harder, I think, to learn on the job. So which is why more law firms have more structured training programs now, I think my firm, the firm I worked with in New York, had it, and Cyril Amarchand implemented it, which is how I joined that role. The idea is to kind of give you some basic tools so that your learning curve is a little quicker on the job. I hope that addresses some of what you were looking for.
Good evening, ma'am. I had a question, ma'am. So, how do we reach out to these organizations? How do we actually like find out what are the best people and actually apply for these?
So Arthur, I've done this like 2 times in my life, right? Like one is when I was interning at when I was in law school in Bangalore and trying to find internships. The other was after my like master's program, actually more than 2 times. Then afterwards, after my stint at IIM also, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, there was no like these are at these points in my life, there was no like ready placement program which kind of helped me. At other points, there would have been, which makes it easier because then there are recruiters who come to campus and you just have to submit your resume. Some, like, you just have to do the interviews. I think what really helped is a lot of research on the internet. You look at each law firm, you look at the partners who are working there, you see if there's any common connect. For example, when I was looking for an job in New York, I went through the website of I had a list of law firms. I went through the website of each of them. On that, I went through their websites and see which of them have some Indian connect so that I can email them, or some practice area related connect, depending on what I wanted to do or have done, or some law school related connect. So it's like you try to find some connection which kind of incentivizes them to respond to like a cold email you might send, and then you try to connect with people who can connect with people who are in law firms. I think that's because rather than a cold email that comes in, when I say cold email, I mean like an email from a person I don't know. I'm more likely to respond when it's from a person I have some connection with. So if someone can send my resume or connect me or introduce me to someone who is working in a law firm or another organization which I'm interested in, that's how I did it. I also did what are called informational interviews, which kind of means it's a low. So I'm not really saying give me a job and then it's harder for them to like say, okay, then it's an interview. They might say, look, we don't have an opportunity. We're not looking for someone. But you kind of say, look, I want to understand more about it. Can we have a chat? And then you get to know them a little better and they might connect you to someone else who connects you to someone else. So it's like a whole daisy chain of conversations, connections. It's a lot of time spent doing your research, background work, and trying to figure it out.
So if I may just add to that, Kripa, Sushma, is
course,
it okay?
yeah.
Can I speak out of turn?
Of
Yeah.
course you.
I think what Kripa said is, absolutely correct. So there's no right way. I mean, you don't know, right, what you're going to find when you're trying to see if there's connections in a firm. It might be a law school connection, or it might be somebody who knows somebody, like a common friend, etc. So one of the things I'm seeing now, and maybe people are getting more guidance around this, is you don't approach people directly with an ask, right? You don't go to them and say, hey, I'm in law school and I'm looking to find a job, or I need an internship, right? A better way to couch it is express some interest in the practice area, or in their career path, and just ask for 5 minutes or 5 to 15 minutes of their time, right? Just so you get your foot in the door, you get a chance to talk to them, and that's easier for the attorney to do oftentimes, right? Just to give you 5 minutes, you're not asking for much, so they'd be happy to make time for you. And I find myself doing more of that these days. People often approach me on LinkedIn and things like that, saying, can we just have a quick call? They're not asking for anything, so it becomes easier, so start with that, and then depending on how the conversation goes, they'll remember you. They might let you know if there's an opportunity, or if they come across somebody who can help you, they will probably be happy to connect you. So and when I speak, I'll talk more about LinkedIn, but yeah, I will leave it there for now.
Ms. Kripa, I have a
That was
question.
very helpful.
I have a question to you, a personal question. See, you have taken 2 degrees, great degrees. That is one in management and the other in law. How did this management degree from IIM, one of the premier B schools in India, has helped you in this legal profession?
Um, uh, Dr. Lima, I think it was it was something that had been on my mind for some time. And frankly, it was just a way to kind of, so all my training and work experience till then had been in the legal field. Like I did my undergrad in law, master's in law, worked in two law firms. So I think going and getting a business degree, I think one, it gave me a degree of comfort and exposure to words, concepts that I had not was not natural for me. Like if someone told me, oh, net income and what's your PAT and what's your EBITDA, I would be like a little uncomfortable because, I was a science student. I didn't really understand a balance sheet or a P&L statement. So it helped me build a degree of comfort with all these concepts. Um, it also helped me to understand or articulate my point of view in a way that's sometimes easier for a business person to understand, because I now feel that degree helped me kind of move from a purely legal argument to just a commercial argument. Like the solution might be legal and I'll still draft it the way in a legal way, but it just helps to pitch an idea differently. Um, and I think also it helps people to think that I won't be extra legalistic and I'll take a practical view, because sometimes in the transactional world, some of the challenges or points of view that one struggles with is like saying, oh, that's too technical and legalistic. Practically or commercially, this is not what we want to do. And it helps me bridge, I think, the two worlds together. But I'm also like I love like structured learning. So this is also like a good way for me to kind of go back to like a classroom and do exams, take notes. So which is nice.
Okay, thank you so much for your wonderful inputs to the students. Okay.
Thank you so much for the information, ma'am. Now, I would like to call upon KK Matthew Vaidyan, student of Mar Gregorius College of Law, to introduce the speaker of the second session.
Good evening, everyone. It's a time to invite the next speaker for the session, Thea Matthews. She's a senior attorney based in Chuck LLP's New Jersey office. She has been with the firm since 2008. Her practice areas include business immigration law and corporate compliance. Prior to starting work in US, she was an associate with an Indian law firm, Amarchand Mangaldas. She completed her graduation from Nassau University of Law and completed her post-graduation from Michigan School of Law, where she was Michigan Grotius Scholar. She is admitted to practice in New York and is also a qualified Indian lawyer. So I invite our esteemed speaker to have the session.
Thank you, Matthew. It was nice to hear about my life being read out. So I really enjoyed listening to Kripa, and in many ways, I think we have a lot of things in common. We both went to law school in India. We both worked in the US, and I'm still here. Kripa is lucky; she got away. She managed to get back to India. So, I just want to start off where it all began. I went to school. I went to high school with Sushma. We went to the same school. And I think in the 12th grade or so, we had decided we are going to apply to law school. Everybody told us, and at that time, law school was really the National Law School Bangalore. That was, the one school that everybody wanted to get into. So we studied hard together. I think we used to meet during the weekends, go over the Manorama yearbook. I think that was the syllabus for the law school entrance exam at that time. And then after months of preparation, we took the exam. The results came out. She got in, had a really good rank, and I didn't get in. Right. And when I look back, even now, I think that was probably one of the biggest disappointments in my life. Because till then, pretty much my understanding was, oh, you work hard for something and you will get it. But I didn't get into the National Law School. So the results came. So I was very happy for Sushma and a couple of my other friends who got into the law school. But I was, obviously sad. And Sushma came the next day, and it was too painful to talk about it, but she left a note with me. And now when I think back, I mean, I don't know, for an 18-year-old to come up with something so mature, I don't know how she did it, but, she just wrote in the note, I know today, you feel sad, but I'm sure a few years later, you will be able to look back and say that, oh, I'm glad I see now why it didn't work out the way we wanted. So I'm grateful to Sushma for that. And it is true. I mean, I didn't get into law school, but I think my life turned out pretty okay. I don't think back so much about it now. So then I went to the next best option because I had taken the entrance exam for NALSA, which was the Hyderabad Law School. It was very new. We were the second batch. So, luckily I got in there. And I think we were in two minds. Okay, should I go? And nobody knew about this law school. It was just, so new. We didn't have any relatives in Hyderabad. So the question was, what are we? So I think one of the things which helped me make up my mind was there was this movie that came out, and it's so silly now, but the movie was Hyderabad Blues. And it was a very cute movie. I mean, it was, like an amateur director, but it's a very cute movie. And I think I saw that and I was like, oh, Hyderabad doesn't look, so bad. Maybe I'll just go there. So I took the train, ended up in Shamirpet, which is not even Hyderabad. It's, I think, about like 40 miles, 40 kilometers outside of Hyderabad, Secunderabad. Very remote place. Really, the law school is the only thing there. So we were there. So the only option was study law. Like there's really no distractions there in the campus. So I graduated. I did fairly well in academics. I did a whole lot of internships, as I'm sure you all do, right? And it was difficult those days even to get an internship. We didn't have a very structured internship program. I think the college, the university tried to help, but because it was a new university, we didn't have seniors, right? An alumni that could help us. So it was pretty much figuring out on our own, okay, where to apply. I think it was generally understood the first year you would try work with nonprofits or NGOs. Second year you would try, I think trial court, and then, do different things after that. So with all those internships, and I think I did the same thing, right? In NGOs, legal aid in the initial years. And then I think the first corporate, law firm type internship that I did was with a smaller law firm called Nishit Desai. I had an interview with them on the phone, I think, and then they interviewed. I did an internship with them. Then after that, the next internship opportunity I think was with Amarchand itself in Mumbai. And then after I graduated, Amarchand hired me as part of the campus placement effort. So I worked in the Bombay office, in the Mumbai office, I should say, for 2 years with Kripa. Kripa, I think, was 1 year my junior. Sushma was also there in Bombay. So it was, I mean, the first 2 years, I don't know what I was doing. I think, it was such a different experience because in law school, you have all these subjects, you study everything and you think you know a little bit. But and maybe it's different now, right? But in those days when I went, when I joined the law firm, there wasn't really a very formal training program. So you would learn from the other senior team members. And sometimes they would be very busy. They would be stressed out themselves, with clients and, challenging partners. And so they might not take the trouble to explain things to you, in a very, in a way that you understand. So you pretty much have to figure it out. So I think 2 years, yeah, we spent a lot of time in the law firm. There was really not much of a social life. The partner that I used to work for, she was very good. I mean, obviously, all partners, I'm sure, in Amarchand, they're all, they're very at the top of the line, right? But she had very high standards, especially when it came to drafting. And I remember, like, this was one of the first shocks that I had because I thought my English, my drafting was pretty decent, but she gave me a contract to draft, I think in the second month or so. And I spent ages over it and I thought it was all polished and nice. And I presented it to her and she just threw it back. She said, this is so sloppy. And I was trying to tell her, oh, ma'am, like, this is my first contract draft. But, it was just so disappointing. Like you pour, so much effort, so much of yourself into something. And then to have it given back to you saying that, covered with red ink. Lot of edits and suggestions. And then I thought she was never going to give me any more work. But she did, and I improved, I guess. And then after 6 months, she said, you've come a long way. Your drafting is now pretty good. So, that's so I think, yeah, for me, it was quite different, just landing up in the law firm. And I don't think law school had quite prepared us for some of the demands of a law firm life or a corporate law firm life. And so these days, I often hear people say that, being in a law firm is like being like a glorified clerk, right? And that was not my experience. I mean, the work that we did, I think it was pretty, like, we got decent work. We got to do research, we got to do we had to think about things like structuring, tax, and it required some skill, like thinking, research, obviously, drafting, interacting with clients, right? So in the beginning, you also don't know how to approach a client. Like, some clients can be very, and they know when they look at you, they might know, okay, this is a junior, an A0, and they might also be a little, they might have some fun at your expense. But you learn to navigate all of that, right? Like, you know that, when you speak to a client, you have to be prepared. You have to read, do the background research, know what you're going to say, know what kind of issues they might bring up, right? So I have to say, I really, it was difficult the first 2 years, but it was, now when I look back, I think the training was really great. Even in the way that, I draft an email now, a lot of what I learned at Amarchand still stays with me. Okay. So 2 years in Amarchand, and then at that, I think, I don't know why I did it, but I think it was just the expected thing those days that you do an LLM, that your academic life is not really complete unless you do an LLM from abroad. So I applied, and I finally did my LLM at the University of Michigan. This is one of the Midwest, Michigan is one of the Midwestern states in the United States. So when I decided to go there, many people are like, oh, why don't you go to one of the schools on the West Coast or the East Coast? I mean, like, Michigan is so cold. Why are you going there? And really no reason except that they gave me the most financial aid. And I didn't, really want to graduate with a lot of debt, right? So I went to Michigan. It is a very small LLM program. So with many other colleges, the LLM programs are very large. The classes are very large. But in LLM, it was in Michigan, it was only about 30, 35 students. And it's a great experience. Students from all over the US, all over the world, different cultures, people from non-common law backgrounds, right? Like, France, and, you learn so much from them. I think it is one of the things I learned is also that, like, you think the LLM is going to be this really great academic exercise, but I came here and then I realized, oh, it's more like, there's so much more to it, right? It's also like making connections, making friends, understanding different cultures, understanding, the US legal system. And most of all, it is so short. Like, it's not even 1 year. It's only like about 8 months. So it's 3 months. I think September it starts, and then you're done by December, mid-December, the first semester. And then the second semester ends by May, right? Beginning of May, starts in Jan. So you're really just spending about 8 months on campus. So you have to make the most of it. You can't just be doing, reading. You have to go out, network, also apply if you want to, find a job in the US. You also have to use that time to work on your resume, to send in applications and all of that. So after I graduated, I got married, right? And that's when I really started thinking about, so my husband was already here in the US. So then I decided, and he didn't want to go back to India immediately. The plan then was, we'll go back after 6 years. So Kripa, you made good on that. I didn't. But then, yeah, so by the time I started thinking about finding a job in the US, I was a little late to the game, right? Because with US law schools, the LLM program, to be honest, it gets a little bit of stepmotherly treatment, right? Because they focus the career placement resources on placing the JDs, which are that's the regular program that US students do for law. So with an LLM, you don't get too much help. I mean, maybe now things have changed. This was probably what 15 years ago. I was sending out applications on my own, like Kripa said, like researching, tier one, which are the law firms that have an India practice, which are the law firms that maybe have a Desi partner there. So trying to figure out all of this. So I emailed many of them. Some of them wrote back, some of them didn't. But finally, one of my friends had heard Mr. Chug, who is the managing partner of my law firm. She had heard him speak at a conference. And she said, oh, he seems really nice. Why don't you write to him and ask him for a job? So I did that. And he wrote back immediately. And I think the fact that I had Amarchand on my resume, that really helped probably. So he hired me without too much of an interview. It was a smaller firm, right? So the firm that Kripa was talking about, Paul Weiss, that's one of the the top corporate law firms in the US. I applied to the Chuk firm, which is a very small, by US standards, it's what we have, I think about 40 attorneys altogether, spread across eight different offices. So they hired me for the New Jersey office, and it's a smaller, I think, so it was a big change. Like, when I showed up at the office after Amarchand, this was like really almost like a mom and pop shop. And like they would set up my computer after I joined, and I had to do my own, like cleaning of the desk and all of that. So I was like, oh my God, what is this? But the firm grew, and so I stayed on there. One of the interesting things that happened is right after I joined. So this was 2008, beginning that I joined this firm. And then towards the end of 2008, that's when the recession started, right? The Great Recession of 2008, 2010. So there were a lot of layoffs. I was on a visa. And yeah, so this is the other thing that I had to deal with, right? The time that I graduated, three things had to happen. I had to pass the bar exam. I had to find a job, and I had to get selected in the H-1B visa lottery, right? So there were these three things all had to happen within, like, I think 3 months or so. And I remember thinking, well, there's no way that, like I'll get lucky with all of them. But fortunately, it happened. I mean, I passed the bar exam, I found a job, and I managed to get a visa. So the thing with the US immigration system is also that there's a little bit of, like uncertainty around it. Because there's so many applicants, they have a lottery, and some of you might know about it. It's called the H-1B visa. That's the, I guess in a way, the most commonly used visa. But there's a lottery. So whether you get picked in the lottery or not, you don't really have much control over it. But all three things happened. So I started with them. And I was initially hired for corporate work because that was my background from India, right? But with the recession, I could see that the corporate work was starting to dry up. Right. So then I was getting a little anxious. Oh, will they lay me off? I was on a visa. It wasn't going to be easy to find a new job. And then I could see that the immigration team, the immigration practice area here, they needed some help. So I figured, okay, if I keep myself really busy, then they can't fire me, right? So I started taking on some immigration work as well. So the thing is, it started with me doing 50% corporate work, 50% immigration work. But soon the immigration practice grew so much, and it's so demanding, right? You can't just, do like something halfway and decide I'll come back to it later. It's daily demands with immigration work. So soon 80% or 90% of my work started to be immigration. And then, so I was learning a lot, very in a short period of time. And then the next thing that happened is two of the partners that I was reporting to, they both left and they started a competing firm. So my boss said, Dia, okay, you manage the firm, it's yours now. And I had just, I think, 2 years of experience in the firm, in the practice area. So I was like, no, I can't do this. It's, like, how do I supervise people who are older than me? And, and I'm so new here. But he said, when life gives you lemons, make. Anybody care to finish? When life gives you make lemonade, exactly. So his point was, this is an opportunity and you just, run with it. I don't care if you mess up, just try it out. So I stayed on, and I had a lot of interesting experiences, some good, some not so good, because I was, still new to this practice area. I had some clients of the firm who refused to work with me. They were like, we looked up her profile and she's only been with your firm 2 years. How can you give her our account? And some of them actually left, right? On the other hand, some clients were really nice, and some of them actually said that they're staying on with us because they had, like, the two partners who left, they were trying to take all the clients away. But some of the clients were nice. They said, we're staying with you. We like working with you. So that taught me that age, or your maybe the depth of your knowledge doesn't really matter so much. I mean, sometimes what people want is somebody that they can work with, somebody that they enjoy working with, right? So never think you're, not qualified enough. Always try to be confident, right? And that's something I had to work on, because I don't think confidence came easy to me. Like, I really had to work on it. I would not be the type that can, just talk about some subject without knowing. I would have to, like, actually read up and tell myself I know enough now to, talk to somebody about it, right? So, but it turned out okay. I gained more confidence as time went on, and the firm has grown. I think I now have about 5 attorneys who work with me. So it's the way, I don't know how it is in India still, but in the US, typically for each attorney, you would have a support team. Like, there'd be probably like 3 or 4 paralegals for each attorney and legal assistants. Just that's how the setup is usually. And with some practice areas, you have more legal staff, right? With immigration and I think personal injury and some, those kind of work, you have more paralegals, more legal staff. With the other, I don't know, on the corporate side, maybe not so much of the, the paralegals doing the work, but, so it differs based on the practice area. So what I want to leave you with is, like, different firms, different cultures. So I think generally in India, when we say firm, we assume it's going to be a corporate firm or a, like a dispute litigation firm. In the US, there's, firms specializing in so many different things, like boutique firms, IP law, immigration, personal injury, insurance, right? And normally you try to go to the expert. You might have like a, point of contact in the firm, but generally you want to try go to the expert in the field. So, you kind of, have to specialize in something or the other. You have to find what's the best fit for you. So after working in the law firm in India, I knew that I really didn't want to work in a large firm. I was more comfortable in a smaller firm, and it calls for a different skill set. Like, for right now, I have a lot of administrative responsibilities as well, like hiring and office administration, things that I don't really enjoy all that much, but you have to do it along with the actual delivery of work and getting clients and all of that. So it's a different skill set. Again, I don't think law school really prepared me for it, but I think being open to these things and being a little flexible, I think that helped, right? When I was in law school, I thought I was going to pursue a career in, I'm sorry, I think it's the lawn mowing company. Um, Can you hear me? Is that too loud? I just try get the. No problem.
No, it's okay. It's all good.
Okay. So when I was in law school, I thought I was going to do corporate law, right? And I did corporate law for some time, but now I do something completely different. But my corporate law background hasn't gone, wasted, because even in immigration, you still have, because most of our clients are corporate clients. So there is a lot of, corporate structuring and things like that, you need to know how, the setup should be and things like that. So that helps. So being flexible is important. And I just made a quick list of things, right? Yeah, so in law school, the other thing is, I think in India, we have this thing that you study all the bare acts, you study different laws, you study the Contracts Act, Specific Relief Act, all of that. And that's good, right? But in the US, they approach it a little differently. They don't really teach you specific state law. They actually train you to think like a lawyer, as they say, be a lawyer, right? So the training, so you cover some fundamentals in law school, like contracts and constitutional law and criminal law, civil law, but they don't really go into any of the specific state laws or even federal laws, right? Because they just give you the tools for you to figure out those laws later on. So that was something interesting, the idea that you come out of law school and you become a lawyer, and it's really just the training to think like a lawyer and be like a lawyer instead of teaching you the actual laws. So, keep that in mind. Whatever you do, make sure you study your contracts well in law school, right? That's really the foundation of, I think, everything else, constitutional law and contracts law. Even if you don't do the other, you don't take to the other subjects as much, I'd say focus on those two, because you keep coming back to those in any area, in any practice area. I think you need contracts, you need, an idea of constitutional law. The other thing is, and maybe this is basic to you all, but be comfortable with computers and typing mostly, right? Because and maybe you all, you use computers, to do your work, you probably do your assignments and all on laptops. But I think at that time when we were, I think it changed a little bit with the batch after me, but we didn't use the computer so much. But these days it's very important. So the ability to be able to type with some relative speed and know some basic features. You don't have to be, you don't have to go and take any computer classes or anything, but just be a little comfortable with using technology, right? That's important. And then networking and LinkedIn. So I think Kripa also touched on this a little bit earlier, but this is something that I think law schools in India don't really teach, or they never taught us, right? But networking is super important. And networking doesn't mean just going to some event and talking to people, right? Networking really could be like in different ways. You could be emailing people. You could just talk to your professors, right? Tell them what you're interested in, ask them, like Sushma, right? I mean, you go to Sushma, is tell her that I'm interested in an internship of the sort. Can you find some connections? So you don't have to think that networking operates only in a particular way. Networking is really just making use of all the connections you have. It could be your family, right? It could be your relatives. Tell them what you do, what you're interested in doing. And this line from that book, right? Paulo Coelho, that you tell the universe what you want, and then the universe will make it happen for you, or something like that. So it's really true. You really have to harness the power of networking. Do it different ways. You might think, I'm in Kerala, how do I approach somebody overseas? Use LinkedIn. One of the things I was made to do when I joined this firm is my boss said, you all need to have LinkedIn accounts and update your profiles. And it's true. Now, I think more and more I see people, like use LinkedIn for recruiting, right? I have put ads on LinkedIn, and I have hired people through LinkedIn. You can, reach out to people you might not normally have access to otherwise through LinkedIn. So have a good LinkedIn profile, with your picture and everything, a nice professional picture, not your Facebook profile picture, and try to make some connections. And don't just keep adding people. Just send them a nice note, or just as Kripa said, like instead of doing a cold call, a cold email, put something, just to establish a connection, right? Say I'm in, like this law school in Kerala, and I'm trying to explore this area, would appreciate some time, etc. People normally would accept if you add a note. I think, like, if I just get an invite from somebody I don't know, I might not accept it. But if they add a note explaining why they want to connect, then that's obviously difficult to say no to. So yeah, and then the last point I want to leave you with is being flexible, right? When I was in law school in India, I think half the class wanted to do IP law, right? Everybody thought IP was really cool, intellectual property. And there were people who were like very determined, like they did all their internships around IP law. They did all their assignments on IP law. But life maybe has different plans for you, and they are now doing different things. They're all successful. But it might not be what you thought you were going to do, right? So you need to be open, and you need to be a little flexible. Of course, like you have a goal and you work towards it, but also keep in mind, sometimes you have to be a little flexible. Like for me, I think the visa, and immigration, and then, like family, those sort of factors, I think it helped me arrive or zone in on the practice area that I do now, right? And I don't regret it, but it's not what I initially thought I would be doing. So I will leave you with that. Thank you. Over to you, Sushma.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the absorbing session. On behalf of the college, I would like to invite Ashwin M., student of Mar Gregorius College of Law, to convey the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Afina. So, respected Director, Reverend Dr. Koshi Isaac Punnamutil, Principal Dr. John P.C., eminent speakers, Advocate Divya A. Matthews and Advocate Kripa Ma'am, Mariam, Vice Principal Administration Dr. Thomas Kutti PG, Vice Principal of Academics, Professor Ramachandran Nair, Dr. Jijimon Sir, Head of the Department, Coordinators of the Center for Internship and Placement, Dr. Liba Babu and Mrs. Sushma George, faculty members and my dear friends. First of all, I would like to thank Advocate Divya A. Matthews and Advocate Kriba Mariam for the valuable insights on various aspects and prospects relating to law and what it's like to work in a legal firm. I'm thankful to our principal and director for giving such a great opportunity. We are thankful to Professor Dr. Thomas Kutty sir for the I'm very much thankful to the center coordinators of internship and placement, Dr. Liba Babu and Mrs. Sushma George, for organizing such a great webinar. I'm grateful to Vinlal sir and Ria ma'am for providing the needed technical support. Next, I would like to thank all the faculty, staff, and students for their participation in the webinar and making it a grand success. Finally, I would like to give a special mention to my fellow hosts of the program, Afina, Matthew, and Anjana, for perfectly handling their roles. Thank you everyone for your cooperation. Have a great evening.
Liba ma'am, if anyone wants to stay back to ask Dia anything, I think Dia would have a little bit more time if in case anyone wants.
That would be nice.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
They're running out of time. No, they were about to conclude. So.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Kripa,
Kripa.
dear.
Bye. Thank you so much. Thanks so much. Thanks, Dia,
Thank you
Sushma.
for
Thanks,
having
everybody.
us. I really enjoyed thinking about all of this and especially listening to all of you and Kripa.
It's a nice experience for us also.
It is
Right.
wonderful. Thank you. I'm
Glad to hear that. Yeah. But we
refreshing
just want
old
to bring
memories.
Sushma down. Sushma, I think I was getting back in touch with Sushma after many years. Very honored that she singled us out for this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So should I stay on? Anybody have any questions?
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? If anyone has any questions, you can just quickly ask because we had to close it because Kripa was leaving at 7, which was the problem. Yeah. Just if anyone.
I'm also going to put my email if you don't
Tell us
mind.
Yeah.
about.
I'll
Hello,
send my
ma'am.
email.
I'm Namrata.
Yes, Namrata.
Namrata. Ma'am, I just wanted to ask you about, would you suggest us to pursue a JD or an LLM in US? Which would be beneficial, which would get us placed there?
Yeah, I know it's a great question for somebody who is pursuing a career here, right? So the JD is what the American students normally do when they choose a career in law. And in the US, the JD is something that you would do after your undergrad, right? So your undergraduate degree would be 4 years. And then you do your JD, which is another 3 years. So by the time most American students are done with law, they're older than their Indian counterparts. So for international students, they normally start with the LLM because that's an easier program to get into. With the LLM, you don't have to take the LSAT. And I think it's not as competitive, honestly, as it would be to get into a JD program. So what I see a lot of people doing these days is they first start with the LLM program, which is 1 year. And then by the end of the program, if you maintain sufficient, like if your grades are good enough, they will let you convert that into the JD. So it's an easier transition in some ways because the first year of JD is supposed to be very, very difficult. Like a lot of students actually drop out after first year of the JD. They just find it, the professors here, they have what is called the Socratic method. They don't really lecture. They ask you questions. You're supposed to come to class reading your material and they will ask you questions, and they will not be easy questions. They will not be direct. often be like, philosophical questions. So what do you think of this? So you have to be really prepared. And some people just, give up and they drop out. So I think it's an easier transition if you come for the LLM. So that way you get the LLM anyway. And then by the time you complete the LLM, you can decide if you want to be considered for the JD. You should probably tell them in the second year. So I think the JD definitely gives you more options. One of the limitations I have after taking the LLM is that I can only take the bar exam in a few states. Not some other states don't let you take the bar exam without a JD. So with a JD, once you do the JD, you pretty much can take the bar exam. Any state in the US gives you more opportunities, more chances of being hired. Also, of course, you have to commit to 3 years in law school. And it is a little more expensive, obviously. But in the long term, if you can do it, a JD is a great option for somebody wanting a career in the US.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
Good evening, ma'am. My question was like being a law student, we do a lot of internship. We have a particular amount of internship that we are supposed to complete in a particular year. So comparing to it, the promising placements that we are getting are very low. So what's your take on it, ma'am?
Yeah, it's that's again another question. So I sometimes see these resumes and it seems that they have spent more time doing internship than being in law school, right? Like there'll be so many internships, 2-week internships, 3-week internships. So internships are great, right? But they cannot be a substitute for what you need to do in law school. Like you have to, read the law, you have to understand, think like a lawyer, you have to develop that ability, right? So I think with the internship, you have to focus on quality than more than quantity. So instead of doing like 20 different internships, maybe if you identify a place that you like, right, and you really want to be hired there, then ask them if you can do a second internship there, a third internship there. So the focus should be more on developing the connections after a point. I mean, after you do a few internships, you probably get a good idea of the landscape, right? You do some internships with law firms, some with government agencies, some with the nonprofits. Is that how your internship program is organized? Do you try to give them exposure to different areas?
I'll just come in there. One of the reasons, one of the limitations that we have is because we are affiliated to the University of Kerala. So we have to work within their framework, unlike in the NLUs where we have a lot of freedom
there's
to.
no autonomy. I see. So can you decide, okay, that I want to go back to this place if
Not
you
too
like an internship?
easy. Not too easy. Not too easy.
Oh, I see. But the good thing is with the pandemic now, you have more opportunities for remote collaboration, right? I think I have like 4 or 5 interns supposedly interning with me right now, and I don't really see them. They are remote interns. But they sent some papers, they asked me for some guidance and all of that. So maybe that's something you could do, because I really think like internships should serve a purpose, right? It shouldn't be that you just have like 20 things listed on your resume. The question would be, if I, as a prospective employer, if I call one of your interns, the places that you interned with, and I ask them for feedback about you, would they be able to give me some feedback about Kripa, like what she did when she was working with us? Is she a good prospective hire material, right? So you should be able to get that out of the internship, that they should like you and they should want to hire you. So I would try to focus energies around that instead of just doing too many of these. I don't know if that
Thank
helps.
you,
Yeah. Anything else? Anyone?
Any other questions? Kindly ask.
Ma'am, you just talked about online internships. Could you talk a little bit more on that and how they differ from the normal ones?
Yeah. So we never did any remote or online internships before. Okay. I think this is something that is now become popular with the pandemic, right? Because many officers didn't want people coming in. And at the same time, we want to be able to provide internship opportunities for students. We don't want them to lose out because of the pandemic. Of course, I think you learn more. There's more collaboration. There's more value in doing an in-person internship. But if that's not going to be an option, then you can do a remote internship where you talk to your mentor or your supervisor over email or Teams like this, right? You set up certain, you take on research assignments, and you turn it around. So we had some good remote interns the last, I think, 1 year. They were very good with research and writing. So I never met them, but got to work with them. And now I have a good sense of their work, right? That's what you want at the end of the internship. You have to make a good impression on the person, such that they might be inclined to hire you. So it's mostly going to be research oriented if you're doing a remote internship, but it's worth it if there's nothing else that's turned up for you. Yes.
Any more questions?
I'm amazed that your students all showed up for, I mean, this is obviously like an after class event, right? That you still have 50 students who were willing to show up and do this. So it's great. Do you have one every day, Sushma, or is it every month? How often do you have these?
This is just 2 together, but now we'll probably take a break. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, good luck to all your students. I'll share my email. If they have any questions, they can email me. And good luck to everyone and to the university. I think you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you so much for it was lovely to have you back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Everyone. All right. Bye now. Good night to you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye, ma'am.